Welcome back to Real Conversations with Nora for our 29th episode. And our topic of discussion this week is part two from my latest book, From a Black Man's Perspective. Joining me today is Anthony Clemons, inspirational teacher, speaker, and author. Pastor John Newman, senior pastor at the Sanctuary at Mount Calvary Church in Jacksonville, Florida. Tyrone Lawson, entrepreneur, and Gilbert White. He is an entertainer and public speaker. Thank you, Pastor Newman, Anthony, Tyrone, and Gilbert for joining us today. I'm so excited about the book, guys. It is from my new book, From a Black Man's Perspective, and these are some of the gentlemen that are featured in the book. So, gentlemen, I read something that said in 2019, which probably is much more now that we're in the beginning of 2021, where there were 4.15 million Black families in the United States children that were raised by single mothers. So share with the audience your thought on this statement. Tyrone, why don't we start with you?
Let's see. So being raised as from a single parent or in a single family household, I don't, and growing up in that environment, I don't think that is actually commonplace. But I do think that it's commonplace as of 2019, as far as it actually increasing and rising, only because it was something that took place back in the 70s. I mean, and of course prior to that, but you saw a rampant rise of it due to a lot of the economic disadvantages that we, as a community had to face, and, had to make tough decisions and choices. One being as far as the fact that the laws had changed with respects to receiving aid from the government aid, to where they couldn't have a male in the household in order for a female or a mother of children to receive welfare or government aid. So of course, that taking advantage of that type of opportunity also was, in a sense, a gift and a curse, but it ended up cursing us later on. So I don't see that that those numbers are shocking as of 2019, but it should be used and viewed as an eye opener as to what we have to reverse, and kind of get away from and get back to the structure of the family as a means of the first line of support, as opposed to using it as a burden or a crutch for some kind of advancement that we think we need in order to move forward as a family.
Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Well, I would say, Nora, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with these brothers and yourself. So good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you for
Congratulations. Fantastic read.
Thank you.
Oh, someone else is talking.
I would agree that what Brother Tyrone said, that a lot of it is structural and systemic, going back to the laws that were in place. Even though these numbers are what they are as of 2019, I think those stats are structurally, systemically, that doesn't happen overnight. And so you look at those previous structural legal restraints and strictures that basically incentivized fathers for not being in the home so that there could be assistance in the home. So it takes a while to restructure that, to change that systemically, to have an impact. So I think that sometimes there's a misnomer also associated with it, that just because the father may not be in the home, that automatically assumes that the father is absent from the child's life. That isn't always the case either. And so that's got to be taken into account. But it just takes a while for things systemically to change. It takes an inordinate amount of time when there's been systematic structure within the legal community to have a certain outcome it takes a while to change that systemically and structurally as well.
Right. Gilbert, I'd like to for you to chime in on this. So I was reading your segment in the book where you said as a child you felt abandoned and without the identity of who you were. Having an absent father left you empty, sad, angry, and confused. And so being basically one of those statistics. What's your thought on that? Can you hear us, Gilbert? We cannot hear you. We can't hear you. Are you muted out? We can't hear you. Okay, so we're going to move on from that. So Anthony and John, why don't you talk about how, because there is a difference with the two of you. That's what I like about this book. There is a variety of men in this book, men who had their fathers in their lives and men who did not have their fathers in their lives. So Anthony, what's your thought about, you weren't one of those statistics because you were raised by both parents in the household. And how do you feel like that affected you and made you maybe who you are? And then also looking at the fact that there were some of your friends who may not have had their fathers in their lives. And, did that make you appreciate who your parents were? And as you looked at those young men, make friends who did not necessarily have their fathers in their lives?
Well, thank you so much, Nora. First of all, I want to thank you so much for having us on this particular platform to discuss about the issues and the concerns about the fatherhood and in terms of the Black men's perspective. But to answer your question, the way it helped me to be more appreciative is there's a quote that says, "Seeing is believing." So if you do not see how to be a father, it can be extremely challenging to even know how to become one yourself.
Right.
And sometimes when you see the presence of a father, it is a visual reminder, is what I call is a demonstration of how it's supposed to be done. Sometimes it may be done wrong, sometimes it's done right. But whether it's right or wrong, seeing is believing. So with my father, I've learned a lot of things by seeing, and I saw a lot of wrong things.
Right.
That's why it was so difficult for me to even write this as I was writing, because I was trying to weed away all the negative things to try to extract some positive things. So it was kind of difficult for me to do that. But because I saw what I did not want to become, even though it was present,
right,
it was a visual reflection. Is this is how you want to be?
Right.
So it helped me to use that as a barometer. To say, you know what? I don't want to go this route. Let me make a 180 turn and go the opposite direction. So if my father, who was not necessarily he wasn't rich at all, but my focus was, instead of being in poverty, let me seek out prosperity. So, but I thank God. But for me, seeing is believing. And one more thing too is that when a person sees the absence of a father, it leaves him to himself to raise himself. And then you have the woman or the mother is trying to be the man and try to raise a man when she's not one. That can be a challenge too. So,
and let's face it, we have parents, two household parents, and even though the father is there, sometimes even though he's there physically, he's also absent physically. And so, and it gives you, like you said, it's like, what good do I get out of that, out of him being there? And then what part do I say to myself, I don't want to be? Would you agree, Anthony?
I certainly do. Absolutely.
Good. And Pastor Newman, why don't you, could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I think we have to also factor in that there can be a kind of systemic demasculation of Black men, and because the culture does that so much to African American men, going back to slavery, the fear of dominant culture of Black men, and particularly when it comes to anything relating to relationships, they always will use that the Black male is dangerous and he is after the white female, that whole mythology. So it created a systemic, once again, a systemic and structural pathology that kind of targeted Black men. And then, in a sense, and I have to be careful how I say this, because I did, some work in my master's thesis as related to racism and the racialization of the culture on brain health in the Black community. That an inordinate amount of pressure was put on the African American woman to make provisions for the lack of the father being there, while the culture basically didn't want the father to be there. And then, sadly, that pathology crept into relationships to where sometimes African American women don't take into account also what the culture has done to Black men. So, which is a kind of cultural internecine warfare that goes on that has a deleterious effect on the family. And that's not to cast blame or dispersions. It's just, I think, to tell the truth. So we have to manage those truths as it relates to how do you properly have an image of someone who you may not see. That is not always a matter of he just doesn't want to be there. There are other factors that come into play.
And the fact that even though we know that if the father is there and the positive role model that father could be, and society wants to diminish who the Black man is, let's face it, who the Black man is and what he should be to his family. And so therefore, to diminish that, we have this negative output that Black fathers are not present, they don't care about their boys. And then we do have there's a reflection of Black males who are not in the household. And so therefore, our young Black boys gravitate, as we said last week, they gravitate to a negative environment. And it could be gangs. Let's talk about gangs and the fact that their feeling is, I'm assuming their feeling is that any kind of love is better than no love at all. If you'll take a bullet from me, that's to me, you're loyal, that you love me, versus somebody who was not there for me or to even show me how to be a father figure. And so what we do know that the cycle repeats itself. It becomes repetitive. It keeps repeating itself. The cycle keeps repeating itself. And then therefore our young boys are drawn to drugs and all kinds of things so we don't get to see the good part of the Black family, which we now have an opportunity to change that. Would you say that we have an opportunity to change that?
I agree.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
So Gilbert, can you hear me now? Can you hear us? No, we can't hear him. I hate that we can't hear him. So if so, outside of your father, were there Tyrone?
I feel left out.
Oh, I know we can't hear you. We're looking to hear you. Can you hear us? You're going back and forth out. So chime in when you can hear us, and so we'll let you speak. But Tyrone, do you feel like they're outside your father, who was not in the household with you? What other role models were there for you as a Black man who did not have his father in his life?
It kind of came in phases. So to kind of piggyback on the statement that you were making in regards to the images of Black men that were not healthy or constructive, or showing that my earliest phase of that would be those that were depicted upon the television. Because as you know, typically as a single mother, raising a son, a lot of times we are left to ourselves because she has to work, right? They have to go to work. So we're left in a community that's, not saying that my community that we grew up in was disenfranchised, but those elements were present in our community to where you didn't want to be outside. So we were left with the television as a device. So, a lot of times the depiction of Black men across TV that came across were those of not non-positive roles, either drug dealers, addicts, or criminals, or even in the case of the Jeffersons. You know, where the Jeffersons they were. George Jefferson was an entrepreneur. He owned his own business. He was a he was a father. His wife lived in they lived in a deluxe apartment in Scott, but their son lived with them, and the depiction of their son was not one that was following his footsteps. So you got to absorb some of those things, and just hindsight being 2020, you didn't realize that that's what was being fed to you at the time is being fed to you. You just absorb it as it being normal. So when you saw it, or when you were confronted with or faced with it, you expected that to be the case. Well, then the other phase as I got older was that there were Black men who were positive. My mother, of course, did expose me to that realm and to that space of those men. And they as far as my uncles, my older cousins, they were positive, and they for the most part took me under their wing and try to place me in a direction to where it was somewhat not leading me in the direction of what I would say the norm that would befall most of us as in our communities. So and that ended up growing into a healthy relationship, not only because it was intentionally exposed to me, but then at some point it became a seeking to find that kind of influence, as opposed to the negative kind of. Because I know you mentioned gangs, where it's any kind of love is accepted. Right. So I think just having that exposure to that kind of upbringing or that kind of influence, I'd say, create that seeking of, okay, I want to make sure that I'm around someone or older men who actually can impart something within me other than the latter.
Right. So let's talk about, because all of you have children. And so also the fact that what can we do? We talked about this last week. What can this now generation of the men that are living in this day and time, what could they do to help this younger generation of young Black men that do not have their fathers in their lives? I know Monday talked about how they were starting a program for Black wrestlers. They came together. So, John, you as a pastor, we talked about the church. What can the church do to help in this situation in the community? Could you just kind of talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think it's important for the church to have mentorships and provide images, as I believe Tyrone was saying, that not having the proper imaging can be problematic. And so what we try to do is we try to match young men with older men, many of whom did not have their father in the home with them, though that's not necessarily correct, but that oftentimes happens. And we just do things they like to do, whatever it is they like to do. But if I could depart, but not really a departure, but I was working with some gang guys and had some conversations with them. And believe it or not, these are guys who were a little older, been to prison, came out, and did not want to see their little cousins and nephews and even sons get in the game. And so we're having a conversation. And so basically said, well, look, what was it that captured you? And they said, believe it or not, what captured us was the lack of opportunity for recreation. And then the streets claimed us. They said when they took away recreation centers, took away opportunities to play ball and to do things, that energy we had. Okay. And including with the fact that oftentimes, because they were single children, single homes, the mothers were working. And so there was a lack of a latchkey was that was the problem. So oftentimes the streets claimed them by default because they had nothing else positive to do. The brother said he watched TV, and that in a sense was helpful for him. In other instances, it's just that the streets get him. So what we try to do is factoring in that if we don't spend time with these young men, there are other things out there that will try to claim them. So we try to mentor. And a lot of times it's recreational stuff, it's going fishing, or it's just, hey, look, talk to me. What's on your mind? What are you going through? So it's not really top down, but it's more organic. They tell us what's going on, and we try to meet at their place of need.
Good, good, good. Gilbert, can we hear you now? We still can't hear you. Can you hear us, Gilbert? Nope, still can't hear Gilbert. Okay, so let's talk about this. Many of these young guys, black guys.
I'm here, but I'm having difficulty getting on. Huh?
Okay, we can hear you. We can hear you now.
I'm having difficulty. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We can hear you.
I feel like I missed so much of the
But share with us your thought of growing up as
I missed so much of the conversation regarding to the initial conversation. I mean, questions that you put out.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. So I just want to say that I dysfunctional family, and there were role models with my family.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Can you guys hear him?
No, he was breaking up badly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Okay. So let's move on, because like I said, they're gifted in many areas. They have gifts, talented, could be artists, but no one to pour into those gifts and feed those gifts. And so as Black men, share with the audience your thought of what we can do. Like, I know I love to write. I'm not a male, but I'm going to tell you, putting this project together with these Black men, it was like really hard, because it was like they just felt like, I could be wrong, so I'll go on record to say I could be wrong, but it felt like that some of them felt like Anthony said, it was hard to write some thoughts, because what writing does, it makes you look at yourself. It makes you see yourself. It makes you see things that you forgot that were even there, and then they pop up for you. And I think that they really had a challenge. I'm so blessed that they were able to do it, but I felt like they were challenged in doing that. So share your thoughts on that, and that's the thing that I feel like as Black men, what we need to help our young Black males overcome. Be confident in who they are, whatever gifts that God is. The Bible says their gifts will make room for you and put you before great people, but they got to know what those gifts are. Wouldn't you agree?
I absolutely agree. I was thinking about what Pastor Newman was talking about as he was making reference to having a program in the church to do that. I also was thinking along lines with him, but making sure that the people who are in leadership have been taught as well. Because oftentimes people who are in leadership, they're just babies with long legs. I mean, because, they have those holes in their souls that has not been tapped into, nor has been questioned. So I think one of the things is to have qualified people who can come in, basically called outsourcing people, who can really know how to help shape, number one, people's self-image. That is so important, because oftentimes people behave based on how they see themselves. So we have to foster and help them to see themselves being better, having better, doing better, making more, becoming more. So, and as I was listening to you talking about finding out their talents, find out what their talents are, what their niche is. If they're selling drugs on the street, that means they need to be an entrepreneur. So find a way, whatever their talents and gifts are, that is so obvious, and they do that without having to. They have those gifts without having learned anything, but they discern. It was downloaded into them. It was a part of their DNA in terms of what it was created to do. use those gifts and harness it in a constructive manner so it can benefit not only themselves, but the community at large.
And wouldn't you agree, though, that the importance of being transparent, obviously, a lot of times we don't want to be transparent, especially if we've been healed and, we're this new person. We don't want, oh my God, I don't want people to know what I've done in my past. But that's where the help can come from. Because if someone could see, your wounds and then see you healed and see you at this new level of life, of who you are in life, that gives people hope. That's what I love what the old church did in the Pentecostal church in the old church. They had testimonies. That's what testimonies do. They help people. They show people I was wounded. I was a drug dealer. I could have been a prostitute, no matter what, but God healed me. And now I am this new human being. So, giving them hope. And I think that we have forgotten that. We've moved away from that. The church has moved away from that in a big way. And I think I know we can't, because our churches are growing, which is a good thing. Wouldn't you agree, Pastor Newman? But we have to have a time when we can share. Would you agree? Because I just think we've moved away from it. That's just my thought.
I think you're absolutely right. And I want to also kind of come on the backside of what Brother Anthony said. And that is that we have to also be comfortable with whatever that gifting is that our young men have. I have a godson. His mother, I knew when she was like 4 or 5 years old, and she was the granddaughter of my secretary when I first came 37 years ago. So now she's a grown woman, and of course, has her own son, and I've spent time with him. And he is a graphic artist. Now, I didn't really right. That's a really unique space.
Yeah.
And so, so we have to be mindful that it's already tough enough on young Black boys. We've discussed that already. But we also have to be able to be prepared that whatever that gifting is, that we are supportive, even if it's not in the main, And so I think that that's extremely important that we do that. And I think the transparency and the authenticity, as you were saying about the writer, that's part of the process. I think we have to be that with our young people. We've got to be able to say, you know what, you see me now, but you should have seen me a long time ago.
Right.
God has done a work on me, and it's all the process.
Right.
We're all on this train. We're just in different, different cabins, all on the same train. And so we're going through a similar process. We're a little further up the road, but that gives us perspective. And that's one thing young people don't have because they're young. They don't have perspective. We can help them with that. But again, I think it all comes down to how well do we listen to them and hear them, and then try to guide them with that energy. Because you got, 65, 70, 80 years wrapped up in that body that's only 18 right now. So you've got to be able to manage that energy.
Wow, that is so good. And anyone else like to chime in on that? Well, again, it's so true that that they do need our help and that we are there to help them. And that's what I love about this project. One of the gentlemen in the book, my cousin, Charles Searcy, was sharing his story with me. And I was like in awe of his story, just knowing his history. And now he just graduated with his PhD in psychology, from drugs to jail and all of that. And I was just in awe of it. And when I got home, God said, you're going to write a book. It's called From the Black Man's Perspective. And I was just like, God, I'm so honored to be able to do this, to help our Black men see the importance of showing their gifts and using their gifts to not only help each other, but also help themselves and help our younger generation so that they are not lost and they know what life has to offer them. Not what the world says, this racist, crazy, chaotic world. If we didn't see anything else, and with what happened in Washington, D.C. this past week was just horrible, just absolutely positively horrible. But we're greater. And, I love what Michelle Obama said, First Lady Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high, we go higher and above all of that. And so I really so want that for our young Black men so that they can operate in their gifts and know, who they are. I mean, I just think it's so important. So again, Anthony, Pastor Newman, Tyrone, and Gilbert, who was having a challenging time, unfortunately, I want to thank you for being our guest on Real Conversations with Nora this week. Are there any last minute comments that you'd like to share with the audience before we leave today?
Well, I just want to just say this, just listen to everybody. And I was thinking on this quote that says this: God cannot heal what you don't reveal. And so if as Pastor Newman was talking about, we have to have as leaders, as male blacks, we need to learn how to listen to the hearts of the people, learn how to listen to what they say and what they don't say. And know what the gifts are and help steer. Say, listen, I know you like to talk. Maybe you need to do a Sunday school lesson, or maybe you need to help your youth. So we have to, as leaders, we cannot heal what they don't reveal, but the only way we can get the revelation, we have to hear what they're saying and seeing what they're doing. And when we see what we're doing, we can also help steer them in the right direction. We can use them as a bow in the quiver. Well, the quiver, y'all know what I'm talking about. And be able to shoot them, and so they can hit their target. But it has been a wonderful experience. Thank you all so much. It's awesome.
Good. Tyrone, any last minute comments?
As I think was speaking, what brought to my mind was a scripture that speaks of children being a reward from the Lord. I think it's in Psalms 127 maybe. It says, just reading, it says, children are a gift from the Lord, they are rewards from him. Children born to young men are like arrows in a warrior's hand. How joyful is a man whose quiver is full of them. Lord. He will not be put to shame when he controls his accusers at the city gate. So with that being said, I take from that we as fathers now, to some degree, because maybe of age and maturity, have a sacrificial obligation and a sacrificial responsibility to those rewards that are being given by the Lord. So with that being said, to ensure that those rewards or those arrows that are being placed in the quivers of these men children that they do belong to are sharpened, in the sense of iron sharpening iron. So I think platforms like this, because it allows people to get a perspective either that they have been either dealing with and had not had a voice for it, and can actually hear the different dynamics of what they may be going through from their perspective, because we have three gentlemen on here now that have three different perspectives that thousands, if not millions of young men and fathers and sons are dealing with in those three perspectives respectively. So being able to be on a platform like this and be able to share these experiences and share them positively with innovative solutions that potentially can rectify and resolve some of the things that they may be going through helps tremendously. In the way of iron sharpening the iron for the future. So I thank the opportunity for being on this platform and being able to share. And I pray that it does reach, if not many, but one that can change and actually pick up the mantle and do some of the things that we are doing respectively as men, for our children, for our future, for our community and our culture.
Good. Pastor Newman?
Well, Nora, yes, I'll say this. And once again, thank you for not only this forum, but also thank you for writing the book. And I say that because
thank you.
When someone else writes your story, they write it from perspective. And that has happened too many times in the African American space, where other people tell our stories. That's a us telling them ourselves.
Right.
So your book is extremely important in that you become a part of that body of the written narrative written by us, for us. And so that's extremely, extremely important. I think the other thing that I would simply say is, first of all, I count it a privilege being with Anthony and Tyrone. The other brother, sorry we couldn't hear him, but we thank God for him as well. But I think it's important that we recognize that at the end of the day, we're not on this planet very long. We have trees that are 300 years old, but we're only here for a minute. So it's important that we don't just have a birth and a death, but that we have life in between.
Right.
But what do we do with that? And I think what makes our lives most fulfilling is when we give it away, when we bless others with it, and not take whatever God has placed in us to the grave, but share it. And so we have to, going back to what Brother Anthony said as well, we have to be willing to be transparent and authentic and share all the good, bad, and the ugly with our young men, so that they don't have to cry some of the tears we've cried. I'm thankful that I had a mother and father in a home. I'm thankful that I grew up in a Christian home where Jesus was not a stranger, where they didn't send me to worship. They brought me to worship with them. But that's not everybody's experience. And so I have to be sensitive as a pastor to those to whom that's not their experience. And as a man and a pastor, I recognize that for some of our young men, I'm the only father figure they'll ever really see, experience, or love they may feel on that Sunday morning. That's why I never let folk, when we were worshiping before COVID, after I preached and whisked me in the back like I'm some celebrity. I stay down and hug everybody until they are all gone. Because I realize the power of touch. So I just want to, again, thank you for this forum and thank you for your contribution to our narrative.
And, in closing, I'd like to add to that. It's so important that our young Black men, or Black men in general, like you said, Pastor Newman, you were able to tell your story. I wasn't telling your story. You were able to tell your story. And that is a form of teaching them the form of journaling, helping them to understand who they are and how they feel. Writing to me is essential. It's good for the soul. It's good for the spirit. It's good for the mind. It's good for healing to be able to write. And I think at that point too, it gives God an opportunity to speak, and on His views, which we know are in His Word, on the things and the directions that we should go in life, the direction that we should be going in life, or even with them. So I pray that they will get this book and see it as a blessing for them to be able to do that. So once again, I want to thank you for your insight on today's topic. And to my Real Conversation with Nora audience, please follow us on social media at BWOT MFG on Instagram and Facebook on Businesswomen on the Move for God. Visit our website at bwotmfg.com. Make sure you stop by our retail store. You will find lots of great items, including my latest book, From a Black Man's Perspective, on there for you, your family, and friends. And I ask you to watch the show each week and share it with others. For I look forward to seeing you next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Real Conversations with Nora. Have a blessed and awesome week. God bless you.